I gazed up the mountain steps, and I knew this was going to be a real journey. Each step was meticulously crafted and set aside were stunning vermilion painted wooden beams, crafted into an arch, a Tory gate. They wound up the mountain as far as I could see, just a glimmer of light in the distance. Trees lined the pathway, some kind of jungle. It was mysterious. The air was hot and heavy, and I climbed step after step after step. It was like wearing a coat, a mink coat, but wet, hot, too tight, and I couldn't take it off. I was climbing, seeking answers, guidance. At the top, I knew I would find someone who could give me the answers I needed, the solutions to all of my problems. But for now, I had to climb, step after step after step. I walked alone. No, that's a lie. I walked guided by a vision. My imagination had a picture of where I might go. Something bigger, something grander, true ambition. But I didn't see the path to get there. I knew it would take the advice of someone who could see further than I could. And so I climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed, following my heart's desire, following my mind's ambition, seeking that which was without me, the answers I was looking for. And with each step, transitioning a threshold, breaking from the mundane and worldly problems that dragged me down, and I stepped towards a sacred, higher conscience, consciousness that transcended. I reached the summit, a stunning shrine awaited me, meticulously crafted over hundreds of years by the finest Japanese craftsmen. A monk greeted me and offered me tea. We sat, and I spoke of all that I ever wanted, all my concerns, weaknesses, insecurities, offsetting the grand desires I had to be more, to become something. All the while, he poured. I spoke, he poured. I spoke, he poured. I spoke, and he did not stop pouring. And the tea poured out of the cup into the saucer. And from the saucer onto the ground at my feet, splashing me. This monk is an idiot, I thought. Can't even pour tea. Why have I come so far? What a waste. Sir, master, what are you doing? The tea is falling out of the cup. It's full. Just like you, my friend. Too full of your own thoughts and ambitions. I cannot teach you anything else. Your cup is full. A wise lesson I didn't understand. But Toastmasters, the truth is there was no shrine on a mountain, there was no climb, and there was no monk. There was the steps at the college I used to work at. There was my manager's office, and there was my manager. The lieutenant who listened to me as I vented all of my fears and talked about my dreams. He had not walked every step of my path or where I wanted to go. But in listening to me, he was able to reflect back and give me some clarity that I did need. He didn't have all the answers, but his ability to listen and reflect was all I needed. Ladies and gentlemen, there are mentors around you every single day. Stop chasing the highest authority in all of the lands. Trust in this moment, in the people you are with right now, and their feedback to you. And just be friends. Just be present with your friend right now in a higher place.